see the Dalai Lama's solution, because his solution is meditate, and it seems it's dissociative. You know, you get high on meditation, and it's dissociative because you're not really tackling with issues, you know. And we've got, of course, Naropa and all of these huge institutions here, and it's somewhat problematic for me because it appears Boulderites, in a sense, have gone into Buddhism in a sense. But it's again with the idea of getting high, but nobody's really working the fields, nobody's really tilling the soil. So I have a problem with that type of, you know, elitist sort of dissociative tendencies to where you're not tilling the earth per se, you know, because it's huge in Boulder, but this business of getting high is not the solution.
Well, I'm sorry, and I understand the situation of your son, with whom I have complete sympathy, and of course, demonstrating against the furs, that's the least one can do. And that Boulder called the police says probably everything we need to know about the corruption of the people who run Boulder, who are not nice people, right? What are you doing calling people on people demonstrating at an event that the Dalai Lama is speaking at, where you're making all this money? Because I and my wife went, and I think we paid $150. Yeah. So I went to a teaching of his in Dharamsala 2 years ago, the first person from my school in 15 years to get to go to a teaching, and we went for 4 days. It was really cool with the Tibetans. And guess what? You didn't have to pay no money to go to a teaching with the Dalai Lama. So anyway, part of the thing, and it annoyed me about it, I'm very fond of him, and I had the feeling that it was the Dalai Lama racket here in Boulder. That is to say, they were getting a lot of money out of it, and they were giving some of it, I'm sure, to the Tibetans, but you know, it was not so good. Now, about him, you should read his autobiography. He was initially a sympathizer with the Chinese Revolution and really liked Mao, and was blown away by Mao. And he also wrote this book to appeal to the Chinese living in exile. So it's really worth reading, because he still calls himself a Marxist and an egalitarian, just as the Chinese have taken the wrong path. So I'm amused by that answer. I'm amused by that. Anyway, I would just say that the manifestation of things here is, it depends. I was taught Tibetan by Lopon Rinpoche, a young monk who has invented a whole book of teaching Tibetan, and is really interested in psychology, and he organized, this is the Dalai Lama's thing, a thing here with the leading criminal psychologist, an older guy in Boulder, and the head of transpersonal psychology at Naropa. And the criminal psychologist, the old guy, he was really smart and interesting, and the woman struck out. I was surprised, I didn't expect that. And he was wonderful, and there was very deep insight on the corruption and emptiness of American culture, and worth hearing. And it is not true that Buddhism here is entirely or mainly an empty thing. That's worth looking at. What is and isn't empty. I would say a lot of things about that, and this thing your son got caught up in is really obscene, were troubled, right? That doesn't mean everything is troubled. Let's see, hello, did you want to say something? Or?
Oh, I was going to ask, how many trees were broken by Standing Rock, by their constructing this thing? That's the historical aspect.
Yeah, well, actually what happened was that there was a treaty of Fort Laramie which cordoned the Sioux off it's 1864, I think, on a limited land, right? But they have a right to their land. So the idea that they are trespassing on Dakota Access Pipeline property on their land, I'm sorry, I know the treaties made by the United States are worthless, but Jesus Christ. I mean, you can't get anything more bizarre than this, right? So there are other things, but check into the Treaty of Fort Laramie. Other questions? Yes?
Just wondering, are you aware of the role of the Tibetan, the Hawaiian water protectors?
Tell me.
So, a year before Standing Rock, I was living in Hawaii, and the natives there scored a huge victory against stopping the world's largest telescope from joining the existing 13 that had been desecrating and polluting the water of Mauna Kea, the tallest mountain in the Pacific and sacred to everyone in the Pacific. And they were the ones who came up with the words, "We're water protectors, not protesters." And they do everything with hours a day of very loud prayers. And then they went to Standing Rock and they advised them to use those words and keep that sacredness. And if you like, I'll send you a link to when they had they blocked, they both legally and physically blocked construction. These huge machines moving up the mountain, they blocked it. And maybe because it's an island and everyone runs into everyone, and because of the sacredness with which they did everything, there was no pepper spray, no batons, no dogs, no water cannons. Instead, the police tearfully gave what they call the honi. It's like a forehead kiss. In Hawaiian, you press your third eye to the other person's, and you breathe out as they breathe in, and you share breath for a minute or something. The cops would do that and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, cousin, I have to arrest you. It's my job." Give them the honi, cry together, and then arrest them. That was as violent as it got up on the mountain.
If only our police were like that.
But partly, I think that's why they inspired the Standing Rock people to at least attempt to keep it. Certainly on one side, it was extremely peaceful, even if, the government side was violent.
This is extremely valuable, thank you. And please send me the link.
Yeah.
As a side note, at the last election, they actually voted a water protector in to the Council of Maui, I think.
Wasn't it on 60 Minutes or Wise? One of the two programs.
I
had
saw
it.
pictures on TV.
Yeah.
It
I
made
wasn't-
some media, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's relatively small.
on
Yeah,
PBS,
water
It's
protection
some
was the
story on
first one.
PBS, on the the First Nations Experience Station
Oh, yeah.
on PBS,
Yeah.
I think
So
is
I'm
where I
pretty
saw.
sure I saw it on 60 Minutes or Wise, one of the two.
Maybe, but I watched that more.
This is fabulous stuff, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about it, and would like to learn a great deal, so anything you can send me,
I certainly
or
will.
anybody
You have the
else
same
wants to.
Email as 3 years ago?
Huh?
Same email as 3 years
Yeah, algilber@du.edu,
I'm sure it's,
or alternately alan.gilbert@du.edu.
I can't lose you.
Okay. And anybody who sends me their email or gives me their email, by the way, I will send you my blog. And it has lots of information with this stuff. Just about my experience in Tibet with the Tibetans. Dharam Sala, the head of the Tibetan Youth Congress, is Tenzin Jigme. He's a wonderful guy, and he went to school in Denver. And he introduced himself to me by saying that he went to the Denver Business School and he was a pioneer. And I said, the pioneers, that's a racist name for, right? And then he said, well, I went to UCD before, and my advisor was Glenn Morris, who's the leader of AIM there. And Glenn said, come to my office and talk. when he met him. And he came to Glenn's office, and he said there was a big Tibetan flag. That's Glenn had put up. So anyway, he was in touch with a Tibetan who was working, a woman who was working in the Department of Justice, and he asked her to take a Tibetan flag to Standing Rock, which she did. And it was planted there, and that's what I wrote the poem about. And I would just say that the commonality of people who are fighting this is a great thing. And maybe I could add, last spring I was invited by a student who's Mapuche to Chile. He and his wife teach at the University of Concepcion, and so I ended up hanging out with Mapuches, who are 10% of the population in the rainforest. And they're fighting to preserve the rainforest. And the silly socialist government, which is neoliberal and is corrupted by the US of A, they are cutting down they have European companies cutting down 2,000-year-old trees. Timber is very important, right? And they're saying, you know, we got this rainforest and it'd be a great thing for people to come and see. And they're cutting this stuff down and they are ecological, like Hillary. And what that means is that they plant water-sucking eucalypti and pines. Boy. So that there was one guy who was arrested for fighting this in the rainforest. He had to get a water tank.
That one we got it right up there.
Okay, well, does anybody else have a question? Otherwise, we're wrapped.
We got an agreement with the church, you know, to get out of here.
Oh.
sometimes.
The church. Did you save the guy?
Oh, we're working on it, see if we can find him a place for him.
All right.
How many veterans are homeless? By the way, if you want to talk to Republicans about homeless people, because right now there's the issue of the right to rest,
Right.
and it's coming up for a
Denver.
big fight in Denver, and it's part of a fight in 3 states, California, which has done it before, will do it next year in Oregon. And last year, second year, lost by 1 vote to come out of committee. I talked to one of the Denver reps, Rosendahl, who voted against the bill. Anyway, we could change this now, and it would be very valuable to do. So. My pleasure.
It's great to have you come.
I'm happy.
Background.